Here's the third part of our interview with John McPhee, a production of WPRB News on YouTube.
Well, it certainly doesn't sound easy, but when your fans and commentators read your work, I've noticed that people say that it's almost as if each word is deliberate and essential, that you can't really take anything out. It seems very very natural, but at the same time very edited. How do you go about with diction, sort of selecting your words? Is it all sort of a first nature kind of thing, or do you ever find yourself saying, I wish I could find a better word for this one?
All the time. Well, when the process I described a moment ago can sound quite mechanical, but the purpose of it all is to free you to write. So once I get all that stuff figured out and put together, then when I'm facing the next section, I haven't got anything with that blank screen there, and you're liberated to write. And then what happens? Basically nothing all day long as I try to get going, and it takes me hours and hours before I have one word that'll come out of me and get with it. But so sometimes that good word that it pops into your head, and so that's serendipitous. But after 3 drafts, the last thing I do, I draw boxes around words that may be perfect in the third draft. I'll draw a box around some word, not because it's wrong, but because I have a feeling there's a better word that could go there. And I don't mean a polysyllabic word. I don't mean a more obscure word. I mean a better word. And then I go on a search through all kinds of things, hunting for that word that would replace the one that's there. And that's kind of that's when you really have everything else in order. You can't afford the luxury of doing that until you have everything else in place. But I always do that in the 4th draft.
Well, and now that we sort of discussed a little bit about the method, I think it's interesting to note that your courses that you teach here are considered by many to be sort of incubators for great writers. Off the top of my head, was it Eric Schlosser? Who are a couple of other?
Peter Hessler, who is at the moment he's been the New Yorker's correspondent in Beijing and has written 2 superb books on China, Oracle Bones and River Town. That's in reverse order. David Remnick, who is my boss, was a student of mine in 1981. Rick Stengel, who's the managing editor of Time magazine, was in my class. But about half of them, there's, I don't know somewhere between near 400 now or whatever. About half of them went into writing, journalism, book publishing, some area like that. And there's a lot of people doing very interesting work. It's been a privilege to work with them. When they come here, they are already very interested in writing and everything else. They don't, spring out of a hat somewhere. And I'm just having conversation with people who are already deeply interested in doing what they do.
And how do you go about sort of teaching a class like that? Obviously, you've got a wealth of experience, but do you try and allow them to sort of find their way, or do you offer a lot of guidance? Or
well, I offer guidance. What I think the essence of the class is that we go over the papers that the students write. We go over them privately and we go over them minutely. And we just sit the way you and I are sitting alone in this room right now, and we talk about commas and whatever. And it's those conversations that are kind of the most important thing in this class. There's lots more. There's a 3-hour seminar and there's da-da-da. But those private conversations are what make the class, I think.
So you really parse sort of sentence by sentence, word by word.
Yeah, I sit in a chair at home with a pencil, and the second time that I've read the thing, I just put down on the paper anything that comes in. I'm reading it on paper, and I anything comes into my head, I put down there, and I get into all that with the student later on.
All right, and let me ask you, a little bit about sort of being a writer, and I think it's interesting that you've written, I guess, with Uncommon Carriers, for example, and Looking for a Ship as well, sort of about people who, on one hand, are doing the same job for a long time, but each job is different. And it struck me very much that, that the truck driver in Uncommon Carriers is very much a little bit like you in some ways, sort of, and how does that work? Do you sometimes feel that it's a little disjoining to be moving so in depth from one thing to another, from truck driving to fish to golfing to oranges? Do you like that sort of style, or do you ever sort of wish that, like some academics, that you had your one field of study and you did that for?
Well, the thing, I write factual writing, nonfiction writing that it all has one thing in common, and that is that it's about real people in real places. And I'm interested, in doing writing, compositions with structures and all that kind of thing, and figuring out where things go. And so you'd move along from one situation to the next, but always this has the common chord of being about real people in real places, and so you just those ones that you mention are people working in freight transportation, but it could be and has been other things. Yeah.
Right, and along the same lines, I know you've said that you don't see yourself as a writer on a mission or having a particular sort of agenda to communicate. You're just trying to tell stories. On the other hand, I can sort of see an argument where the writer, just by the merit of trying to tell a story that hasn't been told before, is essentially going against the grain. I mean, do you ever see yourself in a role to find out these sort of new and interesting stories and sort of uncover things that aren't being told? I mean, isn't that sort of a mission of sorts?
Yes, but I mean, I'm not what is commonly called an investigative journalist, an investigative reporter, and my highest motive is finding interesting pieces of writing to do. I'm sometimes described as this kind of writer or that. For example, an environmental writer, presumed to have a bias in favor of saving the environment. And I think, that's pretty clearly true. And I've written a lot in that general area because drawn to it all my life. And you can't, I try to keep things balanced and to see both sides of something, but your biases, prejudices, and mission, as you put it, can't help but pop out here or there. And I think it probably, it's probably fair enough to say, to describe me as an environmentalist writer, sort of, but mainly I am looking for tales to tell.
And what are you currently, if you're willing to talk about it, are you currently engaged in any new projects, or?
I've been actually engaged in the past year and in the present in a weird variety of things. I finished a book, and then typically, you look around, you do a little piece on this, a piece on that, and I have several ideas right now. That, oddly enough, last summer I got into writing about golf, which is not a fond habit of mine. Golf. I quit golf, and when I was just out of college, and I'm very glad I did. And yet I'm fascinated by it. And I wrote about the U.S. Open last summer, and I may write some more golf pieces over the next couple of years.
All right. Well, that's certainly something to look forward to. And I'd like to thank you very much for coming on the program and talking with us.
Nice to be here.